Hey everybody, welcome to Swedenborgian Life Live. Today we're going to be looking at Apocalypse Revealed. We're going to be unveiling the book of Revelation. My name is Curtis Childs, and I'll be hosting our journey through it. With me, as always, Dr. Jonathan Rose, series editor, generally important person. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Hey, thanks, Chris.
And nobody I'd rather try to wade through this really important yet rocky and steep terrain than you. So
some tough terrain in there, it's true.
And of course, nobody that I'd rather do all that stuff with than all of you out there as well. If you're feeling the love, then would you like and subscribe, please? That helps our channel out. Click the bell to get notifications. This is how this community grows, and we get to this amazing point where we can actually dive into the meaning of the book of Revelation, and we know people are going to come with us on the journey. So we're continuing our series as we explain or understand the explanation of everything in life. Right? So here, this is not just looking at some little obscure corner of some kind of sacred text. This is something about the bigger picture and an important piece to fill in. But you can't just go from eating donuts a minute ago to talking about that stuff. We got to warm up our spiritual brains.
How did you know about that?
We split one. I'm just kidding. We would never eat a donut. Okay, let's take a look at an icebreaker question that's going to get us in the right mindset and get you guys warmed up too, because this is a little delayed audience participation coming up. Let's see what we're dealing with. And if you haven't figured it out by now, the icebreaker it's a spoiler. It's a teaser. It gives you a hint of the flavor of what we're actually getting at. Because we say we're here looking at how this particular book is, but this is getting us into what we're actually going to get out of the experience, right?
So there's a hint. That's right.
If you're in the chat room or if you're watching afterwards, write down what you would answer this question with, because then we can learn from you. The people live will display it at the end. The people who write it in post will write back to you and be very grateful, and everyone else who comes will see yours. So this is the question. When have you felt like you were brought through a trial that ultimately freed you from a kind of mental bondage? Let me read it again. When have you felt like you were brought through a trial, so something hard in your life that ultimately, maybe not felt like it during the time, but looking back, freed you from some kind of mental bondage? We've all got many kinds of ways in which we're ensnared and trapped in the mind, dare I say. So do you got anything that seems to fit this description?
The example that pops to mind right now is a few summers ago, it was like 5 years ago or something like that. I went through kidney stones, and I'd never had that before. And that was some pretty intense pain. I mean, at some point it got so bad, I really was tempted to take a knife and try to cut it out myself or something. It was unbelievable pain. And yet I found that out of that experience came a sense of being closer to God. It was just interesting that somehow I look back and that was a good summer. Because there was something about being that close to, I don't know what.
Yeah.
But the things were sort of extreme and intense, and so it did break down. The part of the mental bondage that it freed me from is a sense that God is absent or doesn't care or things like that.
Yeah.
I could feel the presence in that situation that was helping and sustaining, and so kind of. I felt lighter. I felt better after going through that experience, even though I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But
it's the positive side effects. We go through life concerned about the side effects of the environment that we're in, the things that we're eating, the things we have to take. But you never think about the positive side effects. Somebody might be dreading kidney stones. This is their worst nightmare if this were to occur. But you're saying what you don't think about is that there are these lasting positive side effects that come out of it. And that's
it's true. Lasting is true. That's right.
That's the promise of divine providence. Swedenborg says everything bad that happens, some kind of good is coming out of it. So for me, I would say, sometimes we tell sort of this origin story for me that I had this depression, right, when I was younger, and it was through
not just for an afternoon or something.
No, for years and years, and I would say part of the shades of complexity is it's still very much going on in its own way, but that from that I got an interest in Swedenborg and all that. I mean, that was just sort of a step back, macro level, obvious. This drove me into spirituality because I had to. get something. I had to find a way to survive. And really, if I look at the specifics of what it was in there, a lot of that experience was and is this sense of not being able to control the mind, not being able to stop the narrative that it's in, not being able to win these arguments with my own mind, and just getting scrubbed around and realizing my own powerlessness, even within a space that I thought I owned.
Right.
So
right.
That has done all kinds of good things for me, because it has primed me to accept the more delicate concepts in the Swedenborg's writings about good coming from God rather than from the self, about trusting in divine providence rather than my own prudence, because I got to go with the prudence and I just saw where it led me. Okay, so I got a little metaphor here. Go ahead.
Well, even the origin of your thoughts and feelings, which I think is sort of a specialty of yours, like I can see how that would, you learn something great out of that experience of powerlessness over this.
Swedenborg comes in and says this weird stuff about how heaven and hell is attacking you in the mind. Had I not had such an obnoxious mind, I never would have believed that. But now that I've had to go through what I was going through, you know what? You're right. That is how it is. So my story is that I was supposed to dump out some, there's some grease, the cooking grease, so that it wouldn't go down the drain.
If you fry something, or you've got all this grease left over.
Yeah. So I dumped it out in a bush in our yard. And I knew the dog was going to be interested in it, but I didn't realize how quickly he was going to find it and how fully he was going to immerse himself in it. So just today, he's going in there, and when we let him out into the backyard, he'll go in there and he's trying to lick it all. He comes back in, he's got it on his head, and it freaks him out a little bit. He's rubbing his head on stuff, trying to get it off. I wipe it off of him. But as soon as he goes back out, he does it again, because he just can't resist diving into that bush. The
same thing that got him to do it the first time is operative still, and so he'll do it again.
I feel like I often see those bushes in my mind, go, think down this line, entertain these thoughts, and because of being burned by that stuff before, I can know, nope, I'm not going to dig into that.
Maybe that's the first step toward the burning bush.
I don't know. Either way, I'm not saying he's not spiritually evolved. He more so than I, but it just was, he was teaching me there. So, okay. So
that's great. I love that, because I do feel like there's issues where I know it's going to hurt, and it's not going to have a good outcome. No. But I can't resist. I go back in there.
There was this pride of intelligence before that. If it's in my own mind, of course I'll do fine in there, and if I'm in control here, and anything that could be thought about should be thought about. But just to realize that, no. That is good. That is not in my self-interest.
Wipe that off your head at some point.
It's not like now you're like, well, if you want my credit card, of course I can give you my credit card. No, we know we got to protect our space. So what do you guys think? Write it down in the chat, and we'll display it all at the end. Okay, do you feel warm?
Yes. That was
so
very
now
good.
Let's dive in from an interesting segue here from the world of personal experience and lesson learning to this strange book of Revelation. What's the tie-in? Let's get into it now. As I said, we're continuing our series through the nature of everything, and we're doing it in the format that Swedenborg gave it to us.
Yeah.
So this includes getting to know how these concepts were delivered and a little bit of why, and also an organizing principle. If you're going to try to get everything in the spiritual life together, what's the best way to organize it? Well, let's take a look at how he did it and use that as a jumping off point. Yeah. This is an especially complex, nuanced one, and I'd love to just hear from you. Let's start at the beginning. What are we talking about today?
Okay, we're talking about books that have been traditionally known as Apocalypse Explained and Apocalypse Revealed. Now, that sounds like synonyms, explained and revealed. Yeah. I mean, for years I used to get confused, but I don't even know which one's which.
This is not a retranslation of the same book.
No, it isn't. There are two treatments of, and what apocalypse mean, I know people think it means the end of the world or something. That's a technical term for the book of Revelation. So it's an explanation of the book of Revelation that comes at the end of the Bible, which has got to be some of the most bizarre literature that was ever written, and needs much explaining. And so Swedenborg wrote one book about it that actually comes out in 6 volumes, Apocalypse Explained, and then quit in the middle of Revelation 19, verse 10, when he was about 3/4 of the way through. Just stopped mysteriously. And
it's on his desk, pushed it off.
7 years later, he starts again at chapter 1, verse 1, and he goes all the way through, and this time it's only 2 volumes long in English, and that's what we're talking about tonight.
So, but both of them cover similar things,
Yes,
right? So
absolutely.
we can probably lump them together enough to play the game that we like to call "What's the headline?"
Okay.
We told you a little bit about what an apocalypse is, but what is really happening in these? How is this a useful part of existence to describe?
Right. Well, one headline that comes to mind is, and I can explain this maybe a little bit, but yes, the book of Revelation has an inner meaning, but it's not what you think.
Because the book of Revelation, we do a couple of things with it here. First of all, the book of Revelation is incredibly a bizarre man's bizarre book. We've got dragons trying to eat a woman clothed with the sun when the baby is coming, and then you have horses with scales.
You Things that have eyes on the inside of their body, and
Yes. So
locusts that have, lion's teeth and women's hair or something bizarre.
Oh yeah, they do. And we've done shows about those things.
Yeah,
we could go on.
right.
But how is that this you're telling me that this is God has a message for you. Blah, all of this weird stuff. How is that relevant to us? That's one side of it. But then also we're telling you what's not in the book of Revelation, because it seems like everybody's made predictions about doomsday and this dragon is a symbol of some world leader, right?
It strikes me that a lot of things in the Bible, even the creation story, the miracles or whatever, people could think, well, that literally happened. But interestingly, I don't think anybody just thinks, oh, the book of Revelation is absolutely literal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's various different theories about, I think it means Nero. No, I think it means somebody who lives, it's something that already happened, or it's something that's going to happen, or it's metaphorical in some way. But you got to do something with it, because you can't just, it's too bizarre to take it face value.
And we're going to get into what his actual explanation for it is, both broad, magnificent and grand, but also immediate and practical.
Right.
In our individual lives, that the meaning of the book of Revelation is not relevant to a particular time period. It's relevant to everyone, everywhere, all the time. Let's take a look at what's in these books.
Yeah.
If you were to crack them open, what would we find? And we're just going to go with AR because its table of contents is slightly more interesting. That's kind.
Abbreviated AR.
Yeah. Oh, right. That's like if you're cool and you're talking about it, you say, AR. I was reading AR the other day.
AR.
So check out. We're doing this because we always do the table of contents, but these are not as populated. Look, we've just got Revelation 1, 2, 3, 4, but you see the author's preface.
Those are chapters in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
That they're not. He's giving you 2 or 3 or 4 different revelations.
No.
It's just the book of Revelation, chapter 1. I'll explain chapter 1. I'll explain chapter 2.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be gutsy if it was the other one. Like, look at all these revelations.
But it's interesting what he's got before that.
So the author's preface, where he talks about a summary.
You don't always have an author's preface with Swedenborg. Occasionally.
He decided, I need to preface this book, and this is what I need to put in it: a summary of the doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church and religion. And then a summary of the doctrines of the Church and religion of the Reformed.
By which he means Protestants, generally speaking. And so you have both Catholicism and Protestantism. And basically what he's doing there is kind of a set them up, knock them down kind of thing. Yeah. That's the right way to say it. In other words, he's saying, here's what Catholicism teaches in a brief kind of summary. Here's which is very bold, just even to do that. I wouldn't dare do that. And then here's what Protestantism teaches. And then I'm going to say a third thing, which is neither of the above, but I want to just work off that platform kind of thing. So it kind of gives you a flavor of where we're going with this.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
So let's take a look at, he's making these bold warlike claims and taking on this huge task. Why would it be worth it, and when does it come in the timeline? Let's play why and when. So where do we get this stuff? And where does it? And why do you think he was driven to do it?
Yeah, well, they come at 2 different times. And Apocalypse Explained, it's also sometimes called Revelation Explained, because it's the book of Revelation, is there in 1758, 1759.
Right after Heaven and Hell.
Yeah, that's right. Right after Heaven and Hell, he digs into this. But then he works on it for quite a while, and then, as I say, kind of mysteriously stops at some point. And then 7 years later, in 1766,
Pardon my reach.
That's right, he's got Apocalypse Revealed, A-R, as you put it, and that does get published. So there's quite a gap in between there.
Yeah.
Like the car broke down, and he didn't kind of jumpstart it for a number of years to get going again.
These two books, interesting in that they're the only real sort of companions to Secrets of Heaven, and that Secrets of Heaven was going
That's
through
right.
Genesis.
Good point.
Everything else is these essays and hodgepodges. This is
Right.
back to exegesis. We're moving through.
Going through the Bible, verse by verse. That's right. Just going back to that.
So, let's look at why. We're talking about what, but let's look at why. You know, what can this do for any of us right now? So the first quotes we'll read from it, we'll do from the very beginning and very end, because this is our segment first and last.
All right.
Get a sense of, and we're just doing, again, AR, Apocalypse Revealed here. They're both good. Actually, I think Apocalypse Explained has, and we'll quote from both of these in our next section, but it has sort of more interesting tangents, often a more expansive and fascinating explanation, but for now, let's do
People
the
who are
thing.
digging into the Bible really love Apocalypse Explained because he goes way down. He'll say, well, here's this verse. I'll explain it in terms of these other 8 or 10 or 15 verses, and I'll explain all of them in great detail and bring other stuff in. And so it's great. And Apocalypse Revealed is more sort of cut and terse and here it is, these are the main passages, and you know, then move on.
So this show would be Apocalypse Explained, because we're just, no offense to us.
Yes, right.
Okay, so how does he start it off?
Well, that author's preface that we were talking about a little bit ago has an interesting introductory paragraph. It's a bit long, but let me read this to you because I think it really sets it up well. And it's interesting that he bothers to kind of tell you right at the outset, here's what we're doing.
I got time, so.
Okay, good. Nothing but time. There are many who have sweated to explain the book of Revelation, but as the spiritual meaning of the word has not been known until now, they couldn't see the mysteries that lie concealed in it. For the spiritual meaning alone discloses these. On this account, expositors, the people who are trying to explain it, have conjectured various things, and most of them have applied the things that are in it to the states of empires, intermingling also some things about ecclesiastical affairs. So they explain it in terms of, this earthly organization, or this emperor and this empire and the sweep of history.
Well, throughout history, it was talking about World War II, and this.
Or it was Nero and Domitian, or whatever. It was just Roman emperors, but here's the but, right?
Okay.
Swedenborg loves that word. But the book of Revelation, like the whole word, in its spiritual meaning, does not in the least treat of worldly things.
Right.
Whoa, now wait a second. That's pretty bold to say there's nothing in there about worldly things.
Yeah.
Like, forget about it. It's not about any empire. It's not about that. But of heavenly things, therefore not of empires and kingdoms, but of heaven and the church. And the church, not meaning the worldly organization, but the real connection between heaven and this world.
All right, so that's where we start.
How's that?
It's a very bold opening, and the closing couldn't be more far removed. It could be, but we're pretty out there. We've gone from an author's preface to heaven. He's describing a council of former human beings that are now living in the afterlife who were in the clergy of various kinds.
Interesting. I didn't know clergy went to heaven.
Boom. And this is right at the end of this long account where a decision's been made by this council, and they give it, and we're going to see the angels' reaction to it.
And this is like one of those old-time councils where you get together and discuss theology, right?
Yeah.
Like people did in this world.
Yeah, I can't believe there's not a market for those anymore. At length, this decision was made, that from the deliberations in this council we have clearly seen and thence acknowledged as the holy truth, that in our Lord Jesus Christ there is a divine Trinity, which is the divine, from which that is called the Father, the divine human, which is the Son, and the proceeding divine, which is the Holy Spirit. Thus,
all within Jesus, so Trinity inside Jesus. Okay.
Thus, there is one God in the church. After these things were concluded in that magnificent council, they rose up And the angel keeper of the wardrobe came, and this is like the guy in charge of clothes, came and brought to each of those who sat upon the seats splendid garments interwoven here and there with threads of gold, and said, "Receive these wedding garments."
Wedding garments.
And they were conducted in glory into the new Christian heaven. This is a new heaven that we've talked about in many shows.
Yeah, right.
With which the Lord's church on earth, which is the New Jerusalem, or new church that we talked about ad nauseum, will be conjoined.
So that's sort of the A team in the spiritual world,
Yeah.
and then anything on earth is going to be the B team that works with it, kind of thing.
So,
right?
and after he gives this grand prophecy about the future state of the human race, he ends the book quoting Revelation 22:21, where he says, "The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Amen."
Oh, that's pretty cool. And I happen to know that is the only verse in the whole book that he doesn't explain. He just tosses it in the end.
Dunk.
So it's kind of sweet.
Yeah.
What did you say? It's
Oh,
like
it's a mic drop at the
Yeah,
end. He's
yeah,
like,
right?
"Look,
Like
this
it's
is the truth of the faith that we've been missing. This is how the future is going to go. You figure out what this last thing says, or you know what this says already. The grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you all." I'm out of here.
And something that struck me about that story is that it was almost like there were various councils in the past.
Yeah.
Council of Nicaea, Chalcedon, whatever. And it was like we're redoing, it's a do-over
Yeah.
of these councils in the spiritual world. And this time coming out not with three persons in the Godhead, but having a unity in God. So that's where he lands in heaven. Very interesting.
And you might say, okay, this is all very nice. Where's the spiritual food? Well, you're in luck because next section's all about food. So what kind of things could you be getting out of an explanation of the book of Revelation? What we're going to show you here in these three is that no matter where you go into Swedenborg, you're going to get information about everything else in life. And we'll give you three different excerpts from places where he goes explaining parts of the text and gives us this valuable information that you can use to think about stuff right now. This is from Apocalypse Revealed 294. He's talking here about an honest afterlife that we're all headed towards.
Oh, I hope not.
Here I may add the following account. In this earthly world we have two kinds of speech, because we have two kinds of thought, outer and inner. That is, we can speak from our inner thought at the same time from our outer thought. And we can speak from our outer thought, but not from our inner, even contrary to it. Are you saying what you're really thinking?
Yeah, right.
This is why we can practice pretense, flattery, and hypocrisy. In the spiritual world, though, we do not have two kinds of speech. Rather, we have just one.
Whoa.
There, we say what we think.
That's going to be interesting.
And people will say, why do we have to live in this world? One of the reasons Swedenborg gives is we're not ready to go somewhere where we say what we think.
An honest world.
We need some
Right.
time to get
A little
ourselves
spiritual privacy to work that stuff
to work out, to really, figure out what we do want to think. If we do not, there we say what we think. If we do not, then our voice...
So you can say something different,
Yes.
but...
If we do not, then our voice is harsh and grates on the ear.
Whoa, that's wild. In this world, we're constantly, aren't there whole shows and movies about people who can tell when people are lying or stuff like that? Well, in the other world, anybody can tell.
It's like, does this make me look fat? No, it doesn't.
I can tell you're lying.
Still, we can keep silent.
Thank heavens for that. At least you got the silence.
There's an out here. We can keep silent, and in this way, we can avoid making the thoughts of our minds public. Although, if everyone's talking and you're just, we know there's a reason.
They know there's something going on.
But still, it's interesting that you're not forced, right? There is an out, but you're no longer really able to survive in that atmosphere. This is why when hypocrites find themselves in the company of the wise, they either leave or slip away into some corner of the room, make themselves inconspicuous, and sit in silence. I was just seeing this skit video about a shirt that you can tuck your head into like a turtle when you're in an awkward social situation. And maybe it's something like that. But look at us. We're both here. We haven't slunk away from each other. So either we're both hypocrites or we're both wise. It can't. No, physical world doesn't work like that.
Doesn't work exactly the same way. But that's really something to think about, that honest afterlife, isn't it?
Well, and something
very interesting. Rules are different there.
Yeah, and it definitely is a compass point for me. If I'm kind of being lazy about spiritual development, to realize that I'm lazy about spiritual development, meaning I'm thinking in a way that I know is not really that great.
Yeah, right.
I'm dwelling on things I don't need to. I'm being sloppy. To think that actually cleaning that up really has a tangible purpose to it. That they're heading towards a place where your thought habits are going to be apparent and matter. Not to say that you can always control your thoughts, but you can control how you react to your thoughts.
It's like there's spiritual CCTV all the time, kind of thing, and they've got the tape, So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
sort of a denial buster.
And is that anything you'd think would be in the Book of Revelation? Okay, let's go on to the next thing.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, Swedenborg also talks. We're going to switch over to Apocalypse Explained now, and he talks about some of the process that we go through. Again, where did he get this out of the Book of Revelation? The process we go through in order to be prepared for heaven, because it's possible for us to go to heaven.
Right.
And how does that work? So here's the quote that we've got from 474. Only those, this is about temptations. Okay, those are trials or spiritual crises.
Yep.
Only those undergo temptations there, this is in the afterlife, who have lived a good life in the world according to their religion. So, you weren't like a raging criminal or something like that. But wherein were falsities of doctrine in which they believed. So you had a good life, but some of the thinking and the things you've been taught were not accurate. And so that's a situation that needs to be resolved. For by temptations, falsities are shaken off. Wait a minute. Does this tie in with that ice melter?
Yeah, exactly it does. So this is showing the process that we were describing in our lives happens even more tangibly in the spiritual world.
Yeah, all right. So for by temptations, falsities are shaken off, truths are implanted.
Yeah.
Sweet, okay. And thus they, the people, are prepared for heaven. For all those who shall come into heaven must be in truths. And truths really means in truths means devoted to them. It means you sort of live and walk and breathe in them. That's really your environment.
Well, isn't that explanation or that description of people saying what they think, isn't that just the truth shining through?
Yes, that's right.
Where we're headed is where the truth, takes first place. So get to love the truth.
I hadn't thought about that. And these difficult experiences get you to that point where you're more in touch with that truth. Wherefore, so long as they are in falsities, meaning they're devoted to this kind of structure of false thought in their head, they cannot come into heaven. Doesn't mean you won't get there eventually.
Yeah.
But it's just as long as that situation obtains, by definition, you're not in heaven yet, because heaven's all about truth. The reason why they're let into temptations in the spiritual world after the life in the body is that they could not be tempted in the world. Oh, it has to happen somewhere.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they be tempted in the world? Oh, it was because on account of the falsities of religion in which they were and which were everywhere dominant. So if you got certain ideas in the religious tradition that you grew up with that are not actually accurate or don't work in heaven or something like that, well, there's no point in putting you through some big, spiritual crisis in this world because you don't have the equipment yet in terms of truth. But when you get to the other side, that can get fixed. So it's nice, right? I mean, that's pretty cool when you think about it. It's merciful that no matter what system you grew up with, if you're wrong, there's a correction that can happen after death, And it may be painful, but it's great, and you get eternal life afterwards, so it works out okay.
Not too bad of a trade-off. And I wonder if seeing the impact of that on people in the afterlife, of these false ideas, is part of what's driving Swedenborg to correct them through AE and
come
AR.
back and tell us here, hey, everybody,
this is
honest
what's up.
World,
and then
ahead.
We're going to end with another AE, Apocalypse Explained quote, and this is talking about the distinction between the spiritual and the celestial. Which
he's often talking about that.
Because it's at the root of everything. So this is 1042. Before proving from the word that purple and scarlet signify goods and truths from a celestial origin, something shall be said about such goods and truths. So there he's explaining a phrase from the Bible, but he stops to go on a tangent, and this is where we find ourselves. Not
and
a tangent.
The Bible sort of fixates on these, like you get them all the way back in the tabernacle, these purple, scarlet threads and all that.
I said tangent, but it's not tangent. It's it's very on topic. It's an explanation of just why these colors mean what they do. The divine good that proceeds from the Lord is united with his divine truth, as the heat of the sun with its light is in the time of spring. But the angels who are recipients of the divine good and divine truth proceeding from the Lord are distinguished into celestial and spiritual.
Okay. Celestial being better, right? Of the two.
Man.
They're both great.
They're just complementary. Celestial, he does say, is a little higher, a little deeper. Yeah. Those who receive the divine good more than the divine truth of the Lord are called celestial angels.
So it's coming out absolutely evenly, but some people just pick it up on a bit of a tilt this way.
More heat or more light. Because these constitute the kingdom of the Lord, which is called the celestial kingdom. But the angels who receive the Lord's divine truth more than his divine good are called spiritual angels, because of these consist the Lord's spiritual kingdom. It is therefore evident that goods and truths are of a twofold origin, from a celestial origin and a spiritual origin. So interesting, they says there's two different ways to receive these, and I think because they receive them in those two different ways, we can then, down the chain, get them in these two different ways.
Interesting. Okay, two different flavors.
Those goods and truths that are from a celestial origin are the goods and truths of love to the Lord.
That's what it's all about. Okay.
Love of good. Whereas those goods and truths that are from a spiritual origin are the goods and truths of the love towards the neighbor, or love of the truth. The difference is like that between what is higher and what is lower, or between what is interior and what is exterior. Consequently, as between those things that are in a higher or interior degree and those that are in a lower or exterior. There you go, just sorting out our terms.
So they work together hand in glove. It's not like, well, this is just better. It's just like, well, you have a hand, you have a glove, they're working together. You know, like
without the hand, the glove doesn't do a lot. Without the glove, the hand freezes and becomes useless.
Well put.
This is the
that in Swedenborg's work?
Yes, that's AE 1941759. Isn't it interesting that we're in the explanation of the book of Revelation, and yet that thing about the spiritual and celestial is describing a long-term, if not eternal, condition in heaven, but also describing a condition in the way we receive goodness and truth from God all the time. This is stuff that's part of the basic mechanics of life.
Yeah, and somehow every time he dips into the Bible, I, like a lot of people, you go in there, you just get confused or something. Yeah. But somehow the Lord blesses him to be able to draw out this great stuff that's real nourishment.
On the subject of great stuff, let's just ask to end, how can this help? So we've got these things, they're a little difficult to find a path into, but why are we, right now, your team is hard at work translating Apocalypse Revealed. The last translation came out quite some time ago.
That's right.
Why are you guys, and you're going to be calling it Revelation Unveiled.
That's
right. Be watching for that. Why are you doing that? What's it going to do for the human race?
Yeah. Swedenborg had a very deep concern about the Bible, and particularly he saw the book of Revelation as particularly vulnerable because it's so weird and so wacky. That if people are just going to lop it off, I'm told that even Martin Luther at the time of the Protestant Reformation, he kind of wanted to get rid of that. He pushed it all the way to the back of the book and just kind of wanted, can we get rid of that one? And so in order to salvage it, you got to understand what it's talking about. So it was kind of a rescue operation. And because it's so much about what we go through inwardly, and in a certain way, even literally, Book of Revelation is like a microcosm of everything in the Bible. Almost all the imagery in the Bible comes back in the Book of Revelation and everything. And so it's a lot of spiritual wisdom. He even says that image in the Book of Revelation is I'm suddenly remembering, there's a river in the holy city at the end of the book. Yeah. He says that river is the Book of Revelation, understood. Like the river that feeds everybody, keeps the whole thing going, is the book of, so that's why we do it. Just so we don't all die of spiritual thirst.
There is no shortage of spiritual application. We've done a series of deep dives into the book of Revelation. We did one about the book of Revelation, souls under the altar. We did the four strangest creatures in Revelation. And
the four horsemen.
I think we did the four horsemen. We've done a lot of them. And each one of those we're going deep into how to navigate being a human being. So check out that series as well if you want to know a little more. And they, of course, we're pulling heavily from these books. In that, we've pulled, we did a video about the commandment not to covet, and how this is actually talking about not controlling the minds of others, through immoral means. And that explanation came out of Apocalypse Explained. So there is plenty of cool stuff in there. I think it definitely a worthy addition to your spiritual buffet.
Your library, yes.
So, have we confused you? Do you have any thoughts or anything like that? We're going to do our question and answer segment where we get to hear from you right now. Two things happening right now. Please get your questions in for us to answer right now, and then get your elevator pitch in. What's a single topic in Swedenborg you'd like to see us scramble to explain well in a minute? Get those in, and we'll be doing that in the next section.
Literally 60 seconds.
So for now, let's see what you're wondering tonight. Gordon Brown asks, there is such a profusion of scriptures that emphasize judgment. How is it that Swedenborg could state we are not punished in the hereafter for infractions committed while in mortality? Swedenborg does make the statement that nobody's punished for what they did here, but does that mean you're just, what about all that stuff about punishment in the Bible? And also, is it just, okay, clean slate, and yeah, you ruined everybody's life, but doesn't matter?
Right. Well, just on that final point, Swedenborg says an interesting thing that as the person says, you're not judged for things that you do in this world, but because you're creating habits, you tend to do those same things in the other world, and that causes the trouble.
Yeah.
And so it's very important to clean up our act while we're here, as we were just saying. But also it's even in the Bible you get sort of a double view, because you got all this language and scary stuff about judgment and everything, and then doesn't Jesus say at one point, I judge no one? Doesn't he say that? He says it straight up at some point. I judge no one. And then he says, the word that I have spoken will judge them. And so what's going on,
Yeah.
And then when you see in Matthew 25 the story of the goats and the sheep, there was this big judgment going on. It's just about whether you treated other people well or not. It's kind of cool story in a way, because it's not like, I don't like you, I like you. You're just the type of person I don't like. That's not what's going on. It's all based on how people live their lives and what was in their hearts, that judgment is going on. So even in the literal sense of the Bible, you catch sort of glimpses that undermine that sense of just the Thor with the hammer coming down kind of judgment.
Yeah, there is a dimension of the Bible which is describing spiritual reality. Swedenborg alludes to that some of these passages on judgment are referring to how spiritually evil carries with it its own punishment.
Its own judgment, that's right.
If you think about the world the honest world we just described, where we have much less impulse control, where you say what you think, rather than filter and calculate how I can appear to be one thing when I'm really not. It's that, but much more with urges to do things. So if you're in this life acting on those urges and doing something evil, and you're not sorry for it, and you enjoy it, and you do it again, in the spiritual world, you're not going to be able to control that, because we're so much more impulsive in the spirit. So that is the groundwork for why Swedenborg says that, yes, you don't have a rap sheet that you come in with and thereby are judged, but you can't stop doing the things you did, because that's it's become part of who you are. Now, the funny thing is, he also does describe at times people who had murdered other people, it being exposed that they had murdered the person.
There's almost kind of a trial or something. And
so it's right. Not as cut and dry as he'll say something. We had earlier in this show, he said, what was it? It was in the first quote where he's talking about people never can see something, but when they do see it, I forget, it was in the first one. He does that a lot. So just because he says you're never judged doesn't mean that you couldn't if you have stuff you've done, that could never be brought up, or there couldn't be some kind of
I think
resolve.
there certainly is, and you certainly see that in the near-death experience, don't you? Of kind of a life review and that sort of thing. Another thought I have is that in the book of Revelation, you have this image of this book that's sealed up with 7 seals, and nobody can open it. And John is weeping. The guy who's writing the story is weeping because nobody can open the book. And then the Lamb is able to open the book. And I love the way Swedenborg explains that only the Lord really, really knows the human heart. I mean, I don't know myself. I don't. We're a mystery even to ourselves, and certainly to each other. But the Lord can see. Oh well, no, that trait is because of this, and there's that childhood wound, and then this was a reaction to that, and this is heredity, and this, and I love that idea that the Lord is able to see all those things. So it's truth. I think when He says the word that I've spoken, it's just the truth. And so I thought about those people who sit in the corner and silent.
Yeah.
Did anybody say go in the corner? No, they self-selected. Like, my thoughts are not going to play well in this room right now. I think I'm going to go sit by myself.
Great question. Glad to get the thing on it for a second. Let's take a look at the next one. Crystal Light 7 asks, in the earlier video a few years back, Curtis gave examples of why we weren't in the end times.
Ooh.
Does he believe we are now? And does it matter what Curtis believes? Because what's his track record on knowing what's going on? What do you think? What do you think Curtis believes?
I'm not sure. Curtis is a mystery to me. I haven't opened all the seals, but the Swedenborg believed that there were end times that he got to witness in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
And that's really the cataclysm that so much scripture and other sort of predictions talk about. It's really a spiritual event. It's going to have an impact on this world. And so he saw himself as being a witness to these times. So yes, there's a big upheaval going on. I do think it's going on in our world. The relationship to truth, all kinds of things seem to be shifting, and there's a lot of upheaval that I imagine has something to do with all of that. But it's not going to be the death and destruction, and I'm not saying people will stop killing each other or something like that, but I just mean the total vaporization of the planet is not what he saw happening. We're not in that kind of end times. It depends on how you view the end times.
Yeah, so there was this, if we're talking about the historical example that Swedenborg gives, there was this seismic shift in the spiritual world, and we talk about seismic activity as a metaphor, but really, isn't it that something happens deep in the earth and then the crust and everything is reacting after that?
Good point.
So it could well be that we, in this explosion of human freedom and thought, and that the world is coming up with these things that hadn't come up with anything. You look at the pace of technology advancing, the pace of things like human rights, and that just weren't occurring to the human race for these thousands and thousands of years. It could be that that's an aftershock, but I don't think the world is ending. I don't think it's in a more precarious position than it's been in before. However, as a cop-out sort of answer, I will say that, we're in end times, because I think everybody goes through little end times cycles. Just like the churches go through these big cycles. The end times Swedenborg was talking about was the end of the previous church. But in us, we constantly have these previous ways of living and thinking that get shaken by these experiences like we were talking about in the beginning. And then there is an end times. We question what we know about life. We have to give up things that we had been holding because we see the damage they cause. You emerge a little bit new. I think that cycle's always happening.
And in a way, what I think the book of Revelation is talking about psychologically is that it feels that dramatic, like angels throwing blood and everything turns, or whatever, like they don't actually throw blood, but they throw things down and then all the rivers turn to blood and stuff like that. It feels that dramatic when you're going through it inwardly.
I always say, if you throw something that turns something into blood, you might as well be throwing blood, So anyway, there's a couple of thoughts on that. Appreciate the question. Here's the next one. We'll do one more. Infamous EJ asks, does Swedenborg talk about how the Catholic Church is connected to Babylon in the book of Revelation? Okay, so
She does.
let's get offensive here.
All right, let's
Well,
get
hey,
offensive.
we didn't make this stuff up, and he's only
That's
talking
right.
about the Catholic Church of his
Don't
day.
shoot the messenger.
Yeah,
and all
but
that.
but
That's right.
Swedenborg certainly uses Babylon as a shorthand at times.
He does, and he connects it, and other people do, because you have the great whore of Babylon who's sitting on these 7 hills or
Yeah.
mountains or whatever, and so people say, oh, that's Rome, and this
Sure.
must be the church and everything. Swedenborg's very clear that he's not talking about mom and pop Catholic or something. He's talking about a leadership structure
Yeah.
that takes advantages of people for worldly or selfish or financial reasons or whatever. That's what the Babylon is.
Even
And so
even the teachings themselves at times.
Right. The way Swedenborg defines Babylon is that Babylon's a big subject in Scripture.
Yes, and let me just say, Babylon, you were just about to explain this, but it just hit me of like how important this point is. Babylon does not have to be tied specifically to the Catholic Church in Swedenborg's day.
No.
Babylon is, go ahead, you can say it.
All right. It is, in my view, the use of religion, of spirituality, of religious things in order to dominate over people.
So that is Babylon, using religion and the sway it has over people's minds to dominate over them, to control their lives. It's like a virus you can be infected with, and he was accusing the Catholic Church in his day of being infected with it.
That's right. And he also said that the reason Babylon is in the Old Testament, before there ever was a Catholic Church,
Yes.
is that there were religious organizations back then who did the same thing. It's a pretty basic thing to do. That, hey, here's this religion thing. You seem really moved. You're weeping. Or maybe I can take advantage of you. Because of your devotion, or there's some way I can harness that for my own good, or something.
I watched a show recently about some very prominent televangelists who were completely scamming people, and there may well be Babylon in that. Your local preacher could have some Babylon, but the the deputy preacher doesn't have it.
Yep.
We can dip into
and
Babylon.
the good souls who shuffle into church on Sunday or whatever that don't.
Even in a more personal level, even if we don't go around teaching religious things, although you and I are kind of teaching religious type stuff here, so be careful. But just I would think whenever we're trying to use what people believe is higher to kind of manipulate them, that would be its own little kernel of Babylon. So Babylon, anything that's in a spiritual meaning of the world has to have a universal, timeless application. So Babylon, while you can say it, you can say, I think it's showing up here, I think it's showing up there. What it really is this virus of using this most vulnerable and important place in people in order to not to connect them to God, but to get what you want, which is very much not cool.
And I think it's worth saying that even though Swedenborg grew up in a Lutheran tradition, he came to love the Catholic emphasis on treating people well, doing good works, caring for the poor, all that kind of stuff. And he actually says in some of his books that he thinks Catholics are going to have an easier time accepting his teachings than Protestants will.
And at the time, there was...
And he took a lot of heat for saying that.
Major clash between Catholics and Protestants. I remember in a different video that or maybe a talk, something you said sometime was that Swedenborg describes Catholics streaming into heaven at a rate that would make many Protestant leaders uncomfortable.
Right.
That's a Jonathan Rose quote. So the point is that you...
It's true. He does. He has Catholic popes who are leading communities of heaven, and right.
So it doesn't matter what external organization you belong to. Do you have Babylon inside you? Are you acting from Babylon?
We're all vulnerable to it. Otherwise, the Bible wouldn't be talking about it, because it's not about earthly empires.
Not about earthly...
It's not about, that's right, man.
Not about... we're self-consistent. All right, great. Okay, let's see if we can take this winning streak we're on, are we on one, into the elevator pitch. Let's see what you guys got.
Okay.
Okay, so if you got some ideas that you think are important, you should be able to explain them in a succinct way. You should be able to convince somebody it's useful. This is not just angels dancing on the head of a pin. This is something you need to know. So let's see if we can't hone our skills, and you guys hopefully
get... If we can't, is this our judgment?
Well, who cares? Let's just do it.
Good.
And hopefully...
Entertainment. This is for entertainment purposes.
Only. And so, and maybe a little bit of practice watching us for should you ever be cornered in a situation where somebody asks you about like what's off the left eye, what's Swedenborgian? Okay, right. So we don't know who's going to go first. You want to flip a coin?
I mean, do you want to flip a virtual coin?
I think you're going first,
okay,
man. Okay, good. So let's see what our first topic is.
Elevator pitch.
This is a show where we
a sound that strikes fear.
We pretend that we've both stepped onto an elevator, and in this first round, I will have asked Dr. Jonathan Rose a question about whatever subject you guys have put out. Oh, the spiritual sun. Oh, nice one. Okay, so Pete Dawson gave us the spiritual sun. So you have 1 minute to not only explain to me what the spiritual sun is, but to convince me that it's something important. Are you feeling ready?
Okay.
Okay, let's get our countdown.
It's pretty amazing how dependent our world is on the physical sun. You know, and you're not seeing it all the time, or maybe you're even in an underground parking garage or something like that, but you're still there, you're able to run the car because the sun put that energy into the oil that's in the gas tank and all that. And Swedenborg says that he was able to go to the spiritual world, and he could see that there is a spiritual sun. But the difference is very striking, that the sun of this world is just dead fire. It's just a ball of burning gas or whatever. It's still very handy for keeping us all alive and shedding all that light and amazing radiation, everything that it does. But the sun of the spiritual world is actual love. The heat from it is actual, true, infinite love. And the light is actual wisdom. And I wonder sometimes what it's like to see something in the sky and to think, that is actually love itself. I think that would be pretty cool.
Okay, little awkward moment in the last 2 seconds or so, because I can't talk because the timer dings, but that's great, man. That was awesome. So the spiritual sun, the first emanation of divine love and divine truth, pretty relevant.
Where did you get that?
I don't know. Someone said it at some point, I'm sure. That is just infinitely more relevant even than as the point you're making, that the physical sun, it powers all the food you've ever eaten and put the stuff that we get electricity from and everything like that. So why wouldn't you want to know? Man, I'm glad I stepped on this elevator.
I'm so glad.
Great work. Okay, so there you go. In case you need to explain the spiritual sun. All right, let's flip it up. This is gonna be mine. Proprium. Okay, so Vicki Collins, and let's count it down. Do you ever feel like you're stuck in a maze in your own mind? Do you ever feel like you can't get out of these negative cycles of competition and ego, and why am I upset now, and why can't I just be happy with the things I have, and why can't I just be content with where my life is? I finally got the thing I wanted, why can't I relax? Well, that's because you may have yourself a proprium gumming up everything in your mind. There is actually, what's the key to getting out of this maze? Why are there so many people trying to find happiness but they can't? Well, actually, it's because the unseen enemy inside each of us is this ego-based self-dependence, this sense that I am an island and I am on my own, and that I'm the most important thing in the universe. That is the nature of what is our own, or the proprium. And only way out of all that stuff I explained in the mind is to let go of this sense that it's me against the world, that I don't depend on God for anything, because as soon as we do, the truth can come in. We talked in this show about the truth and how that sets you free. That's what ditching the program will do.
Good. I should have, on the floor of the Senate, can't they yield some of their time today?
Yeah, too many seconds for
Michigan
you.
or something. Yeah, I had a couple of spare seconds there that you could have used. But very good. Yeah. Man, I like the way you started with that puzzle thing.
That concept.
We really don't know what these questions are, and we don't rehearse. There's no way to rehearse this. So that was very good.
Thank you. The proprium. That concept, you look at, I hope what I was trying to communicate there is you look at the landscape of mental experience and emotional experience and all the twisted webs that we get into, and how would you ever figure out how to get out? It's these strange at first, but in the end, the only way you could get out of it is through Swedenborg explaining what the real problem is. And it's something that you wouldn't see at all. Like, you don't go out in your yard and you just, everything looks pretty green. You don't realize where the vines are and how they're strangling. There's trees under there. You don't know it because your proprium vine is so all over everything initially. But he gives you the tools to pick your way out of it. And that's why I'll do the Swedenborg shows until I die, because he gives you the keys that I don't find those keys anywhere else.
Yeah, that's right. Proprium is a Latin word, actually, that shows up in some of the English translations.
Yeah.
In the New Century Edition, we use some other phrases like your sense of autonomy or self-image or things like that. But
what is your own is in some translations.
Yeah, that's right. And the Latin word means belonging to yourself. You know, it's your, and so it's that part of you. It's your sense of ownership of yourself, which we were talking about earlier in this show. The sense that these are my thoughts. I'm in control of my mind. You know, that very thing that you were talking about earlier,
and it doesn't sound
is the problem. And so being able to sort of hold up a light to something as deep as that, like how it's like a fish figuring out there's water all around.
It doesn't sound like it's the problem,
Right.
but it's not. We try everything else. We try, okay, I'll just think positive about things. Okay, I'll just be happy with what I have. But until you get to these very specific technical leverage points, I find that that's where the real progress is. So
that's the situation.
Thank you. Great elevator pitches, great questions.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to think through this stuff with you. And now we want to hear what you all have been thinking about, because it's time to do our ice melter. So at the beginning of the show, we were asking a question, and we're going to get back to it. If you're watching this after the fact anyway, still write down your responses. We want to hear what you have to think about the question. So the question was, since I'm keep talking about this question, the question is, what's the question? And the question is this. When you have felt like you were brought through a trial when have you felt like you were brought through a trial that ultimately freed you from a kind of mental bondage? So I love the idea of hearing what people have to say about this. So let's see what we got here.
Very interesting.
Okay. It begins. I was set free from mental bondage when I could admit to myself I was gay. Josta 356. Thank you. Loss of my younger brother back in June. Then my mom, day after Thanksgiving, taught me to cry again. I remember being out of work for something like 6 months, and that brought me way back to God. I'm doing well.
That's great.
Yeah, fascinating. Went to jail, and mother passed away, and had to completely surrender to survive that trial. That's what it took to get me fully surrender, and I've had a freedom I never had before that incident.
That's really incredible.
Side
Those are
effects.
just great examples. Life-threatening illness that led to kidney transplant. The journey of overcoming the ultimate fear of death helped me live authentically and fully. Purpose in the pain. I'm with you. When I left a difficult relationship, because out of the experience I realized I was at least 50% of the problem. And it was a nice push to growing up spiritual, and such a great spiritual side effect.
Yeah, there you go.
And when I was 15, my older sister was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. That's heavy. My mom was divorced, and I had to be a man at 15. Such a hard time. But I made it. Man, people go through a lot of stuff.
Well, thank you for being willing to share it all.
Yeah.
Surviving domestic violence and sexual assault. Turning to the Lord saved me. Dealing with bouts of insomnia has made me overcome anxiety and fear by turning to God during long, sleepless night.
Yeah.
You know, I have some insomnia too, so it's definitely like, space to turn. Surviving violence as a child. Cancer. Main lesson was to ask God for the first opinion. Ask, seek, knock, and then the hardest part, wait.
Wait.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's good. Went through a rough time, a few years at work, and was gifted a change out of the blue, and I've been so thankful ever since. I had been angry about everything in my life and unhappy. Then industrial accident where I lost movement in my legs and was paralyzed for over a year. Wow. Having to leave my first church as an adult, but finding God in the aftermath even stronger than before. And that's heavy when you lose your, like your religious underpinning.
Yeah, for sure.
Along with all these other very striking examples. Taking care of someone 17 hours a day for 2 years, no breaks, either breaks you or allows you to grow. I felt like I was being tested.
Finally, brief period of homelessness woke me up to the fact that my problems were surmountable and needed to be quickly. Husband of 40 years, love of my life, diagnosed with rare cancer, died 10 months later. I do believe in my grief, my husband Dean ironically brought me to Swedenborg. And then finally, mental bondage describes perfectly my state throughout 2015. I was finally freed from a career that had run its course, and the expansiveness that followed and continues still is mind-blowing.
It almost makes you think that we're allowed, none of those things are things that I think the Lord I want you to have cancer,
Yeah.
or I want you to be abused, or something.
Yeah.
But look at all the good that the Lord brought out of this horrendous. It's almost like the Lord's in charge, and some good is coming out
Yeah.
of all that.
And I think
All
about,
that unbelievable suffering.
I was just chatting the other day with Kent Rogers, who's going to be on our program in a little interview coming
Cool.
up, and he was saying, making the point that eternity to life here, there's no ratio. So you think all those, right, the hard things that people work through, and Swedenborg does have this complex idea that, no, God is not causing those things, but bringing good out of them. The good those people are describing, that's going to be good forever.
That's eternal. Yeah, it doesn't expire.
So you think about
That's
just
right.
how much good the Lord is going to bring out of even these horrendous things. It's making the best of this bad situation, which is that life is messed up at this point, but still finding a way to balance it. And thank you everybody for being willing to share that part of life.
That was a huge blessing.
And to me, the reason that I like the spiritual stuff is that we can go at those kinds of things and find ways to understand them better and get more good. A lot of people mention spiritual ideas as part of how they how they recognize growth.
That's real life. I mean, that's
Yeah,
what happens
right,
to
that's
people, right? It's not what you wanted to have happen. It's not
Yeah.
what you were planning on, but that's what happens.
Thanks everyone for being willing to share that, and thank you, Dr. Jonathan Rose, for doing the
Hey, that
show
was
here
great
today. I
fun,
hope
Kurt.
you guys enjoyed our walk through Apocalypse Explained and Revealed. Join us next week. We'll be doing a panel show, so we'll do an all question and answer.
Nice.
So hopefully you'll have a lot of fun doing that. You don't have to wait all the way till next week, though. We have News from Heaven. This is a show where I go into Swedenborg and draw and talk and think our way through how does this stuff go from text to ideas to life change, like we're talking about here. That's on Thursdays and Saturdays. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. That would be so great. And support us on Patreon, because we're a nonprofit, and so
True.
the only way we can do stuff like this is people giving when they can. And if you go to Patreon and subscribe, we'll give you we'll answer your questions. Karin does this cool
that's
Q&A
right.
thing
Yeah.
there. We'll also give you some behind the scenes stuff, and it's a good time. Okay, so I hope you have a great week.
Thank you, Curtis.
Hope all
You
of
too.
you have a really great week. You've improved my week just to start it off
What a
here.
blessing.
And we'll hopefully be seeing you really soon.
Swedenborgian Life Live is Curtis Childs, host and showrunner, with co-host Jonathan Rose. Live stream tech and graphics by Stuart Farmer and Matthew Childs. Show writing and chat moderation by Karin Childs and Chelsea Odner.